The Nile, the river that built civilizations, carved empires, and still today holds the fate of millions. Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser once declared, "If Egypt is to perish, it will only be because the Nile stops flowing." 60 years later, that fear has returned, because Ethiopia has built a dam that could reshape Africa's future. This is the story of the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, from dream to deadlock to destiny. In the 1950s, President Gamal Abdel Nasser built the Aswan High Dam, a feat of engineering that electrified Egypt and symbolized Arab pride. But Aswan rested on a controversial foundation, the 1959 Nile Waters Agreement. It awarded Egypt 55.5 billion cubic meters of Nile water, Sudan 18.5 billion, and left zero share for Ethiopia or the other upstream nations. For Egypt, the treaty secured its lifeline. For Ethiopia, it was an injustice. Despite being the source of more than 80% of the Nile's waters, Addis Ababa had no legal right to use it. That legacy of exclusion set the stage for a clash that would resurface half a century later. By 2011, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Meles Zenawi was ready to rewrite history. That April, he announced the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a hydroelectric giant designed to generate 6,000 megawatts of power. At the time, 75 million Ethiopians had no electricity. GERD promised to double the nation's energy capacity, power industries, and even export electricity across Africa. But the timing was explosive. The Arab Spring had toppled Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. Cairo was in turmoil, and many Egyptian elites accused Meles of exploiting Egypt's weakness. Still, Ethiopia had little choice. Western lenders shied away, wary of Egypt's pressure. So, Ethiopians funded the project themselves. Civil servants donated a month's salary, citizens bought bonds, even school children raised funds in campaigns, sang songs for Ethiopia. GERD, not just about electricity. It was a renaissance of sovereignty, a project owned by the people. Egypt saw GERD existential threat. In 2013, a shocking incident confirmed those fears. President Mohamed Morsi hosted senior officials to discuss options against Ethiopia. They didn't realize microphones were live. On national television, Egyptians heard politicians openly suggest bombing the dam, arming rebel groups, and sabotaging Ethiopia's government. The broadcast outraged Ethiopia. For the first time, millions saw clearly how Cairo viewed their development as a threat to be destroyed. Public opinion hardened. GERD became more than a dam. It became a symbol of defiance and survival. Diplomacy followed. In 2015, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan signed the Declaration of Principles, agreeing to cooperate on GERD. But progress stalled. Cairo demanded binding guarantees on water flow. Addis insisted on sovereign control. Talks collapsed repeatedly, even after US and World Bank mediation. By 2020, Ethiopia walked out of Washington talks, accusing the US of siding with Egypt. Then came a bombshell. In October 2020, President Donald Trump casually told reporters Egypt could end up blowing up the dam.
Dangerous situation, because Egypt is not going to be able to live that way, and they'll end up blowing up the dam, and I said it and I say it loud and clear.
For Ethiopians, it was confirmation of their worst fears. The world underestimated just how far Cairo might go. Still, Ethiopia pressed ahead, filling the reservoir unilaterally. Cairo saw defiance. Addis called it independence in action. The road to Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, was marked by tragedy. In 2018, the dam's chief engineer, Simonu Bekele, was found dead, shot in broad daylight in Addis Ababa's central square, officially ruled a suicide. Ethiopians mourned him as a martyr for GERD. Around the same time, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, fresh off winning the Nobel Peace Prize, issued his most defiant warning: no force can stop Ethiopia from building the dam.
ብዙ ሚሊዮን ማስተላለፍ ይቻላል። ውጊያ መፍትሄ አይደለም እንጂ በውጊያ በጥፋት ብዙ ጥቅም የለውም። ግብጽም አይጠቅምም፣ እኛም አይጠቅምም፣ ሱዳንም አይጠቅምም። አንዳንዱ ሚሳኤል መተኮስ የሚችል ከሆነ አንዳንዱ ደግሞ ቦምብ ታጥቆ ለኢትዮጵያ ከሆነ ለባንዲራ ከሆነ
It was a national shield against threats, foreign and domestic. At the heart of the crisis lies a fundamental question: who owns the Blue Nile? Egypt cites colonial treaties of 1929 and 1959, which gave it veto power over upstream projects, but Ethiopia never signed them. In 2010, upstream nations drafted the Cooperative Framework Agreement, rejecting Egypt's dominance. Ethiopia signed. Egypt refused. Sudan, caught between its giant neighbours, plays both sides. Politically aligned with Cairo, it also sees benefits: regulated floods, cheap electricity, and fertile farmland. For Khartoum, GERD is both a blessing and a bargaining chip. The fiercest dispute is how fast Ethiopia fills the reservoir. In September 2023, Ethiopia announced it had successfully completed the fourth and final filling of GERD reservoir. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed declared proudly, "It is with great pleasure that I announce the successful completion of the Renaissance Dam's filling. We faced challenges, internal and external pressures, but together, with God, we have reached this stage." Cairo condemned the move as illegal and unilateral. Sudan, mired in civil war, remained silent. Layered atop this struggle is climate change. With longer droughts, unpredictable floods and rising populations, every drop of Nile water now carries political weight. In September 2025, as Ethiopia prepared to officially inaugurate its $4.2 billion mega-project, the GERD, diplomatic tensions peaked once again. In Cairo, the Arab League foreign ministers convened for their 164th session, declaring the dam a matter of Arab national security. Their final communiqué urged a legally binding agreement on the filling and operation of the GERD, rejecting Ethiopia's unilateral control over the Nile as a violation of international law and the 2015 Declaration of Principles. The Council warned that Ethiopia's actions pose serious threats to the water security of Egypt and Sudan, pledging to keep the GERD issue permanently on their agenda. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi echoed the alarm, describing the dam as an existential threat. Sisi warned, "Anyone who thinks Egypt will turn a blind eye to its water rights is mistaken. We will take all measures under international law to safeguard our people's lifeline Ethiopia." Meanwhile, brushed aside these warnings, GERD will not harm downstream countries and will instead bring stability and shared benefits. For Addis, the dam is a gift to generations. But for Cairo and Khartoum, its inauguration without agreement symbolizes a fait accompli, a nightmare realized. And so, as the turbines prepare to roar, the region stands at a crossroads: cooperation or confrontation.
Sitting nearly 2 kilometres long across the Blue Nile, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a source of pride for Ethiopians. Through bonds and cash contributions, they covered most of the $4 billion price tag. But downstream, Sudan and Egypt have so far failed to reach agreement with Ethiopia about how the dam will operate, particularly in times of drought. Egypt is worried about the effect on the Aswan Dam. An international team of scientists has a solution, but it's not been taken up.
We fixed a level for the Aswan High Dam, and we said that, okay, you can construct any dams you want and operate it in any way you want, as long as that level of the Aswan High Dam is maintained. And it's the critical level below which the things become problematic for Egypt.
Egypt relies on the Nile for 97% of its fresh water. And Egypt is also concerned about the dam being built in an area of seismic activity. Powerless to influence the running of the dam, Egypt and Sudan have been left shouting from the sidelines, most recently issuing a statement.
Both parties agreed that the Ethiopian dam has serious repercussions for downstream countries, especially with regard to the serious risks resulting from Ethiopia's unilateral steps to fill and operate the dam. Ethiopia must adjust its policy in the Eastern Nile Basin to restore cooperation between the basin countries.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister insists downstream countries have nothing to worry about.
If you examine the dams in Sudan and Egypt, you'll see they still hold sufficient water. Not a single litre has been reduced. We have no desire to put them in danger. At the same time, this does not mean we must sacrifice our own interests. On the contrary, we must use our own resources wisely while ensuring others are not harmed.
Ethiopia's government wants the dam, set to be inaugurated on Tuesday, to transform the lives of millions of its citizens. Only around half the population of 132 million people have access to electricity. With less than a year to go before elections here, the timing of the official opening of the dam might be seen as a welcome diversion for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. It's one of the rare unifying events for Ethiopians in a country struggling with armed conflict or instability in 3 regions, as well as high unemployment and high inflation. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Addis Ababa.
Our next story is from Africa, where something big is unfolding. An energy revolution. That's what Ethiopia is calling it. This is a rugged, landlocked country located in East Africa, the Horn of Africa, and it is mired in conflict. But now Ethiopia has united to celebrate. It is all set to inaugurate GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. As the name suggests, this is a dam towering 145 meters high and stretching nearly 2 kilometers. Its reservoir is roughly the size of Greater London, or about double the size of Singapore. GERD is one of the biggest dams in the world and the biggest hydroelectric plant in Africa. It has been under construction for more than a decade now, costing Ethiopia a whopping $5 billion. It was built entirely with Ethiopian money, no foreign loans, no international aid, just people and the government funding the project. And tomorrow Ethiopia will throw the switch. So national fervor is high, but in the Sudan and Egypt, the mood is far less celebratory. Tensions are high and the reasons run deep. And to understand why, we need to look at history and a map. This dam is built along the river Nile. Now, when we talk about the Nile, we almost always associate it with Egypt. But in reality, that is not the case. This river, the Nile, touches 10 other African countries, and the dam is built on a tributary of the Nile River called the Blue Nile. It originates in Ethiopia. It joins the White Nile in Khartoum, which is the capital of the Sudan. So this dam is located at a critical juncture for Ethiopia, the Sudan, and Egypt, 3 countries. But why the fight? Well, like with most border disputes, it goes back to a colonial era treaty. In the 1920s, Britain, which controlled Egypt at the time, signed a deal. It guaranteed Egypt 80% of the Nile's waters. But Ethiopia was not consulted. And for decades, it rejected this agreement. In 2011, Ethiopia announced a new plan. They call it Project X. That plan became GERD. Of course, Egypt was not happy. 86% of the water that reaches Egypt originates from Ethiopia. And a dam would make things complicated.
You will develop and grow, and I am with you. But beware that in Egypt, the people live only on the water that comes from this river.
Egypt lobbied the world, it warned of conflict, it threatened war, but over time, its fortune declined. Political instability grew and its focus shifted. Meanwhile, Ethiopia stood firm. It gathered support from African nations, it mobilized funds from citizens, and it kept building. Throughout, a series of failed negotiations came and went. At one point, the US got involved. During his first term, US President Donald Trump tried to broker a deal, but Ethiopia walked away, accusing the US of siding with Egypt. To this day, the standoff continues. Ethiopia says the dam is essential. Now, this is a country that is home to 130 million people. Many are without electricity. The dam could power 60% of Ethiopia, its homes and industries. It will be a major boost to the economy. But the Sudan and Egypt fear the worst. Egypt depends almost entirely on the Nile. The Sudan too relies on it for water. They worry that Ethiopia can control the flow and use the dam as a weapon. If there's a conflict, Ethiopia can use the dam to cause destruction in both these countries without any weapons. That's what Egypt and the Sudan fear. So ahead of the inauguration, Egypt has upped the rhetoric. It says that water security is a quote-unquote red line. Will things get worse then? Realistically, a military strike on the dam is unlikely. It would be disastrous for all sides. Egypt knows it, and war-torn Sudan has enough to deal with already. So for now, Ethiopia celebrates. Downstream, as the Sudan and Egypt boil, Ethiopia refuses to dampen its mood. After all, this mighty dam could change its fortune.
ወደ አርክ መሬትን ለመልቀቅ ጥያቄ አቅርቤያለሁ።
ኢትዮጵያ በመንግስት አስተዳደር ስርዓቷ ሰላማዊ ስልጣን ሽግግር በምታከናውንበት በዚህ ታሪካዊ ቀን በተከበረው ምክር ቤት ፊት ቀርቤ ይህንን ንግግር ለማድረግ ስለበቃው የተሰማኝን ልዩ ክብር ለመግለጽ እወዳለሁ። ትላንት አባቶቻችን በመተማ በአድዋ በማይጨውና በካራ ማራ አጥንታቸውን ከስክሰው የከበረ ደማቸውን አፍስሰው በክብርና በአንድነት ያቆዩት ሀገር አለችን። እኛ እድለኞች ነን። ውብ ሀገር፣ አኩሪ ታሪክ አለን። እኛ መነሻችንን እናውቃለን። በርካታ ዘመናትን የሚሻገር ታሪክ ያለው ታላቅ ሕዝብ ነን። ህብረታችን ለዓለም ምሳሌ መሆን ይችላል። ጠላቶቻችን አንበርክኳል። ሉዓላዊነታችንን ጠብቆ ዛሬ ላይ ከማድረሱም በላይ ለሌሎች ህዝቦችም የነጻነት ትግል አርያ ሆኗል። ኢትዮጵያ ወደ ቀድሞ ገናናነቷ እንደምትመለስ ቅንጣት ታህል ጥርጣሬ አይኖራችሁ። ወደ ብልጽግና መሻገሪያው አቅጣጫ ግን ይቅርታ፣ ፍቅር፣ መደመር መሆናቸውን ደግሜ ላበስራችሁ እፈልጋለሁ። የኤርትራ ህዝብ በተለይም የአስመራ ከተማ ህዝብ ከዘመን አመጣሽ መሳሪያ ሚሳኤል ፍቅር ምን ያክል እንደሚበልጥ በተግባር አሳይቶናል። ሚሳኤል፣ ታንክ፣ ክላሽንኮቭ፣ ብሬን የሰው አካል መማረክ ይችላል። የሰው ልብ ግን መማረክ አይችልም። የሰው ልብ መማረክ የሚችለው ብዙ ወጪ የማይጠይቀው ራሻ መሄድ፣ ቻይና መሄድ የማይጠይቀው በተፈጥሮ የተሰጠን ፍቅር ነው።